Hi everyone, my name is Miss JJ and I'm here to tell you one of our Bible stories. Now I decided to come sit outside because it's such a beautiful day and I am missing meeting in person this year, and I love when we are at our usual Bible school at our church. I love the times when we can go outside and we can have our snack and play games. So if you have not gone outside yet today, go out and play a little bit and look around, look at the trees and the grass and the sky and enjoy God's creation a little bit, okay? Now, this is the fourth story. The first one was Jesus chose Matthew. And on that story, we learned that Jesus chooses to love me. Our second story that Miss Yvonne told was Paul listened and obeyed. And then that day we learned Jesus loves me no matter what. Miss Linda told us the third story where Jesus prayed in the garden, and we learned that Jesus has a plan for me. So that brings us to today, our fourth story where Jesus makes a promise. Now, I bet you've made promises before. Have you ever made a promise to your parents? I promise I'll clean up my room. I promise I will feed the dog. I promise I won't fight with my brother. Well, have you always done what you promised? Have you kept your promise? I know I've made promises before that I didn't keep. I didn't mean it when I said it. I promise I'll feed the dog. And then I sit on the couch and I'm too lazy or too tired or I just don't feel like it. And I don't get up and feed the dog. And I broke my promise. Well, Jesus makes us promises. And the difference about Jesus is when he says he's going to do something and he promises something, he means it. And he never, ever, ever breaks his promise. So if he promises that he's going to be with us always, you know what? He means it. And we don't have to worry about him breaking his promise. Now, I'm going to read this story. And it's called Jesus Made a Promise. And this is from the book in the Bible called Matthew. And some of our other stories also came from the book called Matthew. Now, one of the first words in this story that we're going to hear is the word tomb. And I want you to picture a cave. And when we also talk about a rock in this story, a stone. And picture something giant that you can't even move. Don't picture a tiny little rock. So a tomb, when we talk about a tomb, we're thinking of a cave, okay? After Jesus died and was placed in a tomb, a stone was rolled in front of the tomb to seal it. So a giant rock was rolled in front of this cave. Well, his friends, Mary Magdalene and another woman named Mary, went to visit the place where Jesus' body had been taken. There was an earthquake, and an angel of the Lord came down from heaven. The angel, who was dressed in white, rolled back the stone that had been placed in front of the tomb and sat on it. The angel told them, Jesus is alive. Jesus was going to Galilee to see his disciples, and those were his friends, his helpers. This was wonderful news. The women were so happy. They hurried to find Jesus' disciples to tell them the good news. Then Jesus met the women and said, "Good morning. Go tell my disciples to leave for Galilee. They will see me there." The women looked for the disciples and told them the news. When the disciples heard the women's message, they traveled to the mountain in Galilee where Jesus told them to go. When the disciples saw Jesus, they worshiped him. Then Jesus spoke to the men. He said, "Go and tell everyone about me. Teach people to do everything I have told you." Jesus told the disciples that they should tell people everywhere that Jesus is alive. And then Jesus said, and remember, I am with you always. So that was the promise he made to them. He is always with them. And that is the same promise he makes to us. He is always with us. Now, to help us remember that promise, Jesus is always with you. I got some rocks. Now these are stones, are rocks. They're really little compared to what the stone we were talking about in today's story that nobody could move. But if you can find any rocks like this, you can write on them. Ask your mom or dad first though. But so this one, if you can read, you know that says Jesus. Okay? So remember the promise. Jesus is always with. I bet you know the last word, you. And that is the promise that he made today to his disciples and to us. I'll say it again. Jesus, and this time I found an empty container. So I'm going to put the rocks that I wrote on in my container. Now, if you want to find some rocks and an empty, any kind of anything, you can do this too. Jesus. Say it with me if you remember the promise. Jesus is always with you. So they're all in my container. I'm going to put the lid on it. Isn't that a pretty box? I bought markers and they came in this pretty box. Okay, so my promise is in here. Jesus is always with you. Now, do you remember in the story that I read to you, right before the angel of the Lord came down from heaven, something happened. If you remember, say it. Of course, I can't hear you because this is just a video, but I'll read it to you now. There was an earthquake, and an angel of the Lord came down from heaven. So I thought we could make a little earthquake here with our rocks. So if you want to make one of these sometime, you can do this and make up a song or a rhyme. So here's the one I have. I know something that is true. Jesus is always with you. How do you like that? You want to say it with me? I know something that is true. Jesus is always with you. Now, I'm going to read it to you one more time. I think you probably know it by now, but let's see if you do. So I'm going to hold up the rocks, and I want you to tell me, even though I can't really hear you, maybe your mom is sitting next to you, or your brother, or your dad, maybe they can hear you say this promise, okay? Jesus is always with you. Okay. Thank you for listening, and remember, go outside and play. Bye-bye.